Hey folks, welcome back out to the chicken coop. It's molting season, fall here in Colorado, and we have a molting hen. It looks like a couple more that are on the verge of starting their molt, so I figured I'd do a video explaining molting, the process, the care process, what it is, everything, so stick around. So what is molting? Molting is when a bird sheds its old feathers and regrows new feathers. Typically happens in the fall as the weather starts to change, as daylight gets shorter, in preparation kind of for that winter when their feathers are incredibly crucial for them. The molting process is kind of getting rid of the old feathers, the ones that are a little bit beat up, and just regrowing a new plumage so that they can stay warm and cozy in the winter time and things like that. That's essentially what molting is, basically just the shedding of old feathers, the regrowing of new feathers. Chickens pretty much go through a molting phase once a year. Some of the signs that you're looking for to know that your chickens are in that molting phase, the most obvious one is going to be that they're losing feathers. You're going to have feathers everywhere. You're going to see a noticeable change in feathers on the chicken themselves. Our Easter egger is currently going through the molt. The feathers on her head, especially in her neck area, are really thin. She has no tail feathers. And you're going to notice that in your hens. They're just going to drop feathers. It usually starts from the head neck area and kind of works its way back. So when you start seeing a little bit of thinning out of the feathers in the neck area, a little bit scraggly looking, and especially when the tail feathers fall out, you know you have a chicken that's in molt. So those are the visible signs you're looking for. You're also going to see some behavioral signs. The chickens during this part will pretty much quit laying eggs, and the reason for that is that they're saving up all that protein and intake and stuff like that to grow their new feathers. Their energy is going into growing new feathers rather than to producing eggs. So don't expect to get a whole lot of eggs from a molting chicken. In fact, pretty much expect to get no eggs from a molting chicken during that phase. Other behavioral signs are that they get a little bit shy. They're going to kind of segregate themselves from the rest of the flock. Chickens without feathers, they tend to get picked on. It kind of puts them at the bottom of the pecking order. So they'll stay away. They'll kind of shy away. They'll sit there a little bit puffed up because, you know, it's cold and you got to puff up to stay warm, especially when your feathers are in disarray. So they may act in similar ways as a sick hen will act. It's not necessarily a sickness. They're not feeling their best, but they're okay. You don't need to treat them in any way. It's sometimes hard, though, to tell whether your chicken is starting to molt or whether it is sick. So look for those other signs, the losing of the feathers, the tail feathers, things like that. Take note of the season. It will usually give you an indication that things are okay. They're just going through a molt at this time. The other thing to know is how to care for a chicken going through a molt. Molts typically last 8 to 16 weeks, so it's a good long process that they're going to be going through this, and there's a couple things you have to keep in mind. One is you really want to make sure that they're getting a good amount of protein intake. If you feed your chickens feed from a store, usually they have a higher protein feed that you might want to switch to during this time, somewhere around like 18 to 20%. Another thing you can do is supplement protein with mealworms or things like that. We like black fly larvae. We will throw black fly larvae in the chicken run for all the chickens, but the molting chickens, they really need that extra protein. So if you have food that you can give them with extra protein in it, that's really going to help them with that feather regrowth and get them back to full plumage as quickly and as easily as possible. Another thing to consider is they are losing a lot of feathers, and it happens in the fall. And fall weather, it can vary greatly. In our area, it varies greatly in itself, but also just, you know, where you are, the climate that you're in. So if you're getting some chilly nights, you want to take that into account as well, because they don't have their full insulation. So you want to make sure, like always, that they're in a dry spot, a draft-free spot, where they have a better chance of staying warm. You want to do that anyway, but it's particularly important when your chickens are molting to make sure that they're draft-free and dry and just have a nice, warmer place, especially at night. Another thing to take into consideration is you're going to see those white pen feathers coming in, the new feathers that they're growing. It's an uncomfortable process for a chicken. So really try to avoid picking them up and holding them as much as possible through this, because those new feathers are uncomfortable for them anyway. So if you're handling them in any way, it really gets uncomfortable for them. A couple years ago, we did have a hen go through a molting process in the dead of winter, and it was negative 15, 20 degrees at night sometimes, Fahrenheit. It was just too cold, we felt, to have a chicken out there that was not really insulated as well as they should be. So in that case, we actually pulled that chicken out of the flock, put her in a crate that we have in a garage that's heated a little. I mean, it's heated at that temperature, it's heated to maybe, 45, 50 degrees, but that's a whole lot better than negative 20 degrees. It's something that you might want to consider if those temperatures are dropping super low. But for the most part, if it's just a cold night, if it's getting down to, 32 degrees or so, they'll probably be all right. I mean, they go through this in nature anyway, but if it's going to be incredibly cold, or you're going through a cold spell, something you might want to consider is removing that chicken and making sure that they're going to be in a place where they're staying warm. Or if you have a heated coop or something, then you're probably all right with that too. There's varying degrees of molting. A typical molt really isn't too bad. They look a little bit mangy and thinned out, but they'll still, relatively look like chickens with feathers, maybe without tail feathers, but that's going to be the biggest sign. And you still want to take care of them, but they can also go through what's called a hard molt. And we had a chicken last year that's no longer in our flock. She went through a very hard molt last year, and here's some footage of her. She was incredibly mangy looking, just a whole loss of feathers, very uncomfortable. You could tell by the way she walked that she wasn't her normal self. She was kind of squatting a lot and really sequestered. That's when you really want to think about maybe removing them for a couple reasons. One, like I said, it gets cold at night here, and that amount of feathers, it was a little concerning that she'd be okay. Although we never actually fully removed her just because it was in a season that we felt okay. But if it was going to be real cold, she would have been one that we definitely would have found a place to keep warm for a while. The other thing is that they're just susceptible to bullying when they look like that. Chickens have kind of a thing. If you notice, if a chicken's getting picked on, usually the other chickens are pecking them at the same spot, and there's a reason for that. They kind of see that bare skin as a vulnerability and will attack it, and it's just more likely to happen when so much of their skin is more exposed, when there's less feathers. Thank you for watching this video. If you found it helpful, please like and subscribe. I have chicken reviews. I got a lot of videos on how to maintain your chickens through the winter. I have more coming up. So please consider liking and subscribing. Thanks for watching.